What's happening? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap show. We're going to take a look back at the two big Pegasus World Cup races from Gulfstream Park on Saturday afternoon, the dirt and the turf. Also, a little bit of a tweak to this format in the recap show and potentially going forward if everything goes the way I'd like it to. I feel like these ones get a little bit long, a little bit, sort of laborious, however you want to pronounce that. The point is, I kind of think things need to be a little bit tighter, and the stakes montage has always been a spot to throw the races that we couldn't get to. Well, I'd kind of like to turn that into more of a, let's take a look at a couple interesting things from those stakes montages. So from now on, the recaps are probably going to be, for the foreseeable future anyway, the recaps are going to be restricted to just probably 2 or 3 races, the biggest ones of the weekend. The other stakes races will all go into the stakes montage, but then we'll follow that up with a little bit of a quick hit segment. I'm not going to touch on every race in the stakes montage, but if there's something worthwhile or worth noting, we'll throw it out there, and we'll just kind of go rapid-fire session like that, and then we'll roll it in, as we always do with the weekend's best as far as buyers are concerned, as well as DRF TV schedule events, X, Y, and Z. Those of you that are listening live, thanks for doing so, but most of you take this thing in podcast form. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. You'll get everything that DRF TV has to offer. Make sure that bell icon is lit up. You got to click the subscribe button if you haven't done that. If you're over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or however you get your podcasts, write us a review, give us a positive rating. It's always greatly appreciated, and make sure you subscribe, again, so you get everything that we got out there for you. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Let's dive into the big one. The Pegasus World Cup. $9 million, mile and an eighth on the main track. Unfortunately, Mother Nature did not cooperate with us on Saturday afternoon, January the 26th. It was a rather wet day, just as a whole. The turf was soggy. The dirt track was just an absolute sloppy mess. But at the end of the day, the show must go on. City of Light was your second choice in here, bet down to odds of 9-5. Your favorite was Accelerate, the Breeders' Cup Classic winner in 2018, the older male dirt horse of the year in 2018. He was awarded an Eclipse Award there. He went off as your 3-2 favorite. After that, you got pretty juicy prices on everyone else. And in a way, similar to the turf race, which we'll talk about in the next piece, bit of a one-horse show in the grand scheme of things. What a way to go out for City of Light, an emphatic winner of the Pegasus World Cup. Here's the stretch run.
City of Light had the lead, and they cut the corner and open up. City of Light puts away Accelerate with 1/8 of a mile to go. At the inside and Seeking the Soul, then Bravazzo. But City of Light keeps going, and City of Light will win it. It's City of Light for Javier Castellano, and a romp in the rain. He won by 5. Second is Seeking the
City of Light, never in doubt, wins by almost 6 lengths in his final career start. He gets the job done over Seeking the Soul. Really one of the only horses to make up significant ground on the main track all day at Gulfstream Park. That was a big effort from him, a beautiful ride from John Velasquez at 34-1 to run second. By the way, never should have been 34-1. And Accelerate, your Breeders' Cup Classic champion of 2018. He finishes third at odds of 7-5, rounding out your superfecta is the always honest Bravazzo at odds of 10-1. Let's take a look at the Pegasus World Cup winner, City of Light. 6 of 11 lifetime, never out of the money, and 11 lifetime starts. 10 times in the exacta, over $5.6 million in career earnings, owned by Mr. and Mrs. William K. Warren Jr., trained by Michael McCarthy, bred by Anne Marie Farm in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Javier Castellano, and you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Quality Road out of a Dehair mare named Paris Notion, and he goes out with a bang with a 112 Beyer speed figure. Have no information as far as Timeform US is concerned. I wonder if that's going to be the situation going forward. If so, we'll just use the Beyers to our advantage. Look, this was just an all-around authoritative victory for City of Light, and it's you can say what you will. We know the financials and how this whole game works, and everyone has said it. It's disappointing we won't get to see this horse run as a 5-year-old. But boy, I mean, if you're going to go out in style, and this is the way to do it. Michael McCarthy was quoted afterwards saying, "We thought he would run well. I was anxious all week to run. You can see why now. I thought he'd run well. To run like that against a group of horses like that, wow. I don't think there's any better way to put it than wow. This was an eye-opening performance. Beautiful sort of trip throughout. You look at the fractions, he was up there. He did a lot of running. 23-1, 46-4, 10-4 for 3/4, stopped the clock in 47-3 over a sloppy sealed track. The only other pace that was relatively close at the end of it, the pace setter pattern recognition, he was up the track. Tom's d'Etat was right up in there. I suppose Bravazzo was the next nearest one, and he was down sitting in the pocket throughout. City of Light was 2-3 paths, pushing the pace throughout. This was just an all-around class performance from City of Light, and he's going to go off to Lane's End now and be a sire. I believe he is positioned, I could be wrong, you can double-check this. It's out there on Twitter with a number of different publications and some of our folks at DRF. I believe he's across the way. His stall is now across from his dad's, Quality Road. City of Light now also, as many people have already made mention, becomes a very, very interesting sire prospect now going forward, because he'd already won at 1 1/8, but now you do it on this stage, a grade 1. He's a grade 1 winner at 7 furlongs, and he's a Breeders' Cup winner at a 1-turn mile. There's a lot to like about City of Light going forward. Don't know that the 1 1/4 was ever going to be his game. We saw him try it one time over the summer at Santa Anita, and it just didn't work out for him. But you know what? The good news is you don't need that necessarily to be a prolific sire going forward. Most of our races are not run at 1 1/4. But if you can get everything between 7/8 and 9, got a very, very interesting future going forward for City of Light. It's a shame we won't get to see him on the racetrack ever again, but at the end of the day, hopefully we'll get to see many of his offspring go on and do some things at least remotely close to what he was capable of doing on his best day. Seeking the Soul, as I said, a beautiful ride from John Velasquez, a strong effort from this horse. This was a refreshing rebound from the dud and the egg that he laid in the Clark handicap. But as we talked about a little bit, I brought it up in the preview pod, talked about it with Illman when we went over the race. Probably just a matter of bringing him back too quick coming out of the Breeders' Cup, and it just continues to emphasize that point of those races coming 2 and 3 weeks after the Breeders' Cup for these horses. That's going to be tough. They were really cranked up for those races in the Breeders' Cup, and then all of a sudden they show up, don't run particularly well. Seeking the Soul gets a few months off, comes back and fires. Again, as I made mention, really the only horse in this race that did a heck of a lot coming from the back of the pack. I think you need to give him some bonus points for that. As far as, and we'll talk about him a little bit more here in a minute as far as context is concerned. Accelerate, the 3rd place finisher, the 2018 Older Male of the Year, the Breeders' Cup Classic winner. He is done. He finishes 3rd in here. John Sadler was quoted after the race saying, "We feel he ran a good race. The winner was going to be the winner. We had great fun. Oh, we had a great run with him, excuse me. Big picture, we're thrilled, as they should be." Sadler did a tremendous job with this horse. This was a horse that, again, you got to see him develop into what he turned into. If he was taken from us as a 4-year-old or late as a 3-year-old, we would have never seen this horse develop into what he eventually did. I believe Mike Watchmaker put it very, very well. I'm going to paraphrase. It feels like this is the right time for Accelerate to be retiring, because it certainly feels like he has tailed off a little bit here as he has gone on. He's still running fine races, don't get me wrong, but his best race would have been there with City of Light, and this certainly was not his best race. I maintain in 2018, to me, the performance for the older horses in general of the year was his Pacific Classic, that of Accelerate. I just thought that was a tremendous effort, and he never got back to that effort in his 3 subsequent starts. And you know what? It is what it is. Sometimes that's how it goes. Arrowgate never got back to his Dubai World Cup effort. Accelerate never got back to his Pacific Classic, but he was able, he was talented enough, and he was in good enough hands, John Sadler, to go on and still continue to be successful and win races and be productive. He is now off also to Lane's End to be a sire. We'll find out. He's got to be the best son of Looking at Lucky so far. That's just off the top of my head. He earns a 101 buyer. So again, just strictly from a numbers standpoint, he has certainly tailed off from what his best is. But he's been a cool horse. He's been a nice one to keep an eye on. He's been good at 8 furlongs. He's been good at 9 furlongs. He's been good at 10 furlongs. He goes out as one of the better horses the past few years, does Accelerate. Bravazzo finishes 4th in here in his first start as a 4-year-old. Now, the tough thing here is I was very... Look, it's the same old Bravazzo. He shows up. He runs his race. He's a true blue-collar type. He's going to give you everything he's got. He's had a beautiful trip here in this race, sat the pocket throughout. He had to squeeze up the rail rounding the far turn when pattern recognition packed it in and started going backwards. The problem is, as has been the case with him basically throughout his career, you get to the far turn and Luis Saez is just going to town and the horse is just spinning his wheels. and then he rallies again once they get back onto the straightaway. So he doesn't take the turns very well. I don't know that all of a sudden that changes here. He's run a number of times. Maybe it does. The bigger concern for me, I don't think he changed leads until the wire, and it's very difficult to see it. You got to go back and look at it from a head-on standpoint, and that's not necessarily what this horse has done in the past. And you do wonder, he has had a lot of racing as a 3-year-old, and even now. I mean, he raced one more time after the Breeders' Cup, and now he ran here. It sounds like they may end up running him in the Dubai World Cup. And again, from a talent standpoint, I'll get to that piece in a moment. I do wonder if at some point is the boy going to need a quick little breather before we can continue to see his best. I think he's going to keep showing up, and he's going to be blue collar, like I said. I'm saying all the nicest things that you can say about him because it's what you want in a racehorse, what you want in an athlete. You show up, you give it everything you got. Sometimes it's good enough, sometimes it's not. You start to see something a little bit different. Perhaps it was the wet track. Who knows? But at the same time, it makes me look at it and go, does he need a little bit of a freshening before we continue on and we see his best here as a 4-year-old? But my bigger point here is you had Bravazzo finish 4th by a neck ahead of Audible, who finished 3/4 of a length ahead of Gunnevera. Now, Gunnevera, he lost a little bit of his momentum on the far turn when one of the horses started to back up. But I can't really use that totally as an excuse. But my bigger point here is now, without City of Light, without Accelerate, no Justify, obviously, as a 4-year-old, the older male division right now, who's boss? You have McKinsey, who I'm still not totally convinced how far he actually wants to go. He's proven at a mile on an 8th, but I don't know that he loves it. Seeking the Soul, look, with an effort like this, that makes him an interesting candidate in a division like this, but we've seen the good Seeking the Soul and the bad Seeking the Soul, and I still do wonder if he actually appreciates one turn more so than 2. Bravazzo, like I just said, I didn't love the way that he finished in this race, but he's a hard trier. Yoshida, who we'll talk about him in the Dubai World, all these World Cups, man. The Pegasus World Cup Turf and his sort of dull effort and what Bill Mott had to say afterward. Diversify, I think a lot of people are forgetting about Diversify. He will be back. It's going to be a little bit of time. He's going to be going out with Jonathan Thomas. He's a horse, but again, from 1.25 miles, I know he's one at it, but is he really best at that, or is he better at 9 furlongs? Leo Frick, who's a Grade 1 winner. He won the Clark at the end of the year, but he's missed a little bit of time here. Backyard Heaven, remember that name? For a minute, people thought he was going to be the bee's knees for Chad. Then things went a little bit sideways, and then he was put away for a while. Hopefully he comes back. My bigger, just the overall point, just kind of, to summarize, this division is very, very muddy right now. When you take out City of Light, you take out Accelerate, all of a sudden, is it Gunnevera? Is it Audible? I mean, again, I hate to keep harping on Audible, but Audible ran his race. You're a 94 buyer. Right at this point, he's a mid-90 to a high-90 buyer kind of horse. That's not what you look at when you think of the leader of the older division. It's just not. You're looking at a mid-100. You're looking at a high 100. McKinsey, I think, is capable of that. But again, from a distance standpoint, does he really want to do that? I don't know. This division is going to be one that needs a little bit of sorting out going forward. As far as the bottom half of the field is concerned, True Timber, nice little horse. I never thought of him as a Grade 1 type. I know he ran second in the Cigar, but again, just not really my cup of tea for a race like this. Imperative, look, at almost 200 to 1, the fact that he didn't run in the bottom 3 and he ran 8th, I think that's the tip of the cap, and well done. The old boy can still run a little bit, I guess. As I made mention when we talked about it in the preview, just get him to the Charlestown Classic, get him back to the bull ring. I think that's what you see as best as a 9-year-old. Tom's d'Etat could have been the wet track. I think more likely than not, it was the first time that there was real sort of resistance, where he's up there relatively close to the pace. It was an honest pace. Wasn't blistering, but it was honest. And I think when the real running started, again, maybe it was a combination of the wet track, and who knows, maybe there was something else that happened that I haven't read about, but just felt like, you know what, when the real running started, he just couldn't cut the mustard, and this was his first time against really good competition. Something awesome for a moment there, rounding the far turn. I thought I was going to be able to hit third with him, hit the board and round out this thing at a decent price. He ended up stopping badly. Probably a combination of when the real running started, he had nothing left. Maybe it was the wet track, whatever it was. Kukulkan, the Mexican super horse, he finishes second to last. Just a shocking underlay at 26 to 1. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but no, in no way, shape, or form should he have been that kind of price. But he didn't finish last, and pattern recognition, we talked about it. Drawing outside the way that he did, Jose had to be aggressive, and when the horse wasn't going to go on with it, Jose wrapped up on him. I still maintain he's probably going to be better going shorter distances than opposed to these two turns. At the end of the day, it was a smashing send-off for City of Light. It was a phenomenal effort. Tremendous all around, better than his Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, which I didn't think was necessarily capable for a horse like this. He jumps up to a 112 Beyer speed figure. He goes out on an absolute high note, and we also say goodbye to Accelerate. So two of our big dogs are gone. And now that division's about as clear as mud. No pun intended, because there was mud all over the place on Saturday at Gulfstream. We'll find out how things shake down in the future. For now, City of Light goes out a winner. He wins the Pegasus World Cup with a 112 Beyer speed figure. And the co-headliner down at Gulfstream Saturday was the Pegasus World Cup Turf, the inaugural running of this race. Take a look at the field. Only 10 signed on. I know officials are disappointed, and look, fans and even the ownership groups involved in this race disappointed you could only get 10 signed on for this spot. But at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a good idea. I think the timing of the race and the event itself is a little bit difficult on the calendar from a grass standpoint. Field of 10, it was a good field. I don't think it was a spectacular field, but you had a little bit of international flavor. You had Magic Wand coming over from Europe. You had Aerolith coming in from Japan. Then you obviously had all of our big players here in North America, whether it is a Catapult, a Delta Prince. If you want some sort of intriguing runners, you have a Fahan Mura who's likely to get out there and cut out the fractions. You have a horse like Next Shares, Yoshida, Channel Maker, Bricks and Mortar, you name it. You had a little bit of everything in this spot. Mile and 3/16 over very testing ground. I think ultimately that was a little bit of a side story. When it was all said and done, though, there was only one story in this race. The inaugural Pegasus World Cup Turf was a no contest because you had one horse in this race. It was an absolute blowout. Bricks and Mortar gets the job done in impressive fashion. Let's take a look at the stretch run of the Pegasus World Cup Turf.
Top of the stretch, here's Delta Prince to issue the challenge to Catapult up front. Bricks and Mortar into the clear and to the attack with Magic Wand fourth. Eighth of a mile to go. Bricks and Mortar puts his best foot forward and strides to a clear lead. It's Bricks and Mortar kicking away, and the inaugural Pegasus Turf to Bricks and Mortar, a 3-length winner.
Bricks and Mortar gets the job done as the second choice at odds of 5-2. Magic Wand, filly, she runs in at 112 pounds, and she gets the second money in here at odds of 9-1. And Delta Prince, a horse that, from a distance standpoint, this was probably a little bit far for him. Ran a bang-up race in the House Silks for Stronach and Company, 9-1, finishing third. Catapult rounds out your superfecta at odds of 6-1. We'll talk about him a little bit more momentarily. Let's touch on the winner, Bricks and Mortar. 6 of 8 lifetime, never been out of the money in 8 lifetime starts. Over $3 million in career earnings now with this victory. Owned by Clarovich Stables Incorporated and William H. Lawrence. Trained by Chad Brown. Bred by George Strawbridge Jr. in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Arad Ortiz Jr. And you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He's by Giants Causeway out of an Ocean Crest mare named Beyond the Waves. A 106 Beyer speed figure for Bricks and Mortar in this visually phenomenal performance here. Over yielding ground. Stops the clock in 54-2, almost 54-3. You look at the fractions of this race. Again, Timeform US, they haven't put out any of their information just yet. But at face value, if you believe that it was a very yielding turf course and a testing turf course, 22-4, 47-4, 11-3 for 3 quarters. They stopped the clock in 54-2. I don't know that it was a bog, but it was there was some moisture in the ground, and the fact that this horse was able to finish as well as he did, wins by more than 2 lengths, finishes in 42-21. This was just a giant performance all around. It sounds like his next start could be the Grade 1 Turf Classic on the Kentucky Derby undercard, and Chad Brown has made mention of other races down the road, most notably the Manhattan at Belmont Park on the Belmont Stakes undercard. I was a little bit concerned about the distance for this horse coming into a race like this. Because he really, I know he had won at 1 mile and 1/8, but to me he felt like just a crack miler. Well, after a performance like this, I can't say that. Clearly, he goes on and just really, when he leveled off and extended down the lane, visually very impressive. Makes you think, all of a sudden, those 1 1/4 mile races are well within his range based on this effort. So that brings the Manhattan into play. That brings a race like the Arlington Million into play. It gets a little bit intriguing when you get closer and you're thinking farther ahead toward potentially Breeders' Cup time. But one thing you need to keep in the back of your mind with a horse like this, Bricks and Mortar, this is a 5-year-old who has run 8 times. He has had major injuries in the past. you need to be a little bit concerned at how many times are you going to get a horse like this to come through and be able to deliver any kind of a performance. Forget about a performance this impressive. Should we get some Breeders' Cup time with a horse like this, I have a funny feeling. Let's just lay out a hypothetical sort of campaign from here on out. You've got the Turf Classic at Churchill at 1 1/8. You got the Manhattan at Belmont at 1 1/4. The Arlington Million at 1 1/4 out at Arlington Park. I would wonder maybe then in the fall, do you try to stretch him out to that 1.5 miles in a race like the Joe Hirsch at Belmont Park? If you don't choose to go that route, maybe you keep him back and you turn him back to 1 mile and you get him ready for a race like the Breeders' Cup Mile. Long way to go before we get to that point, but this is very clearly one of the more talented horses as far as the turf runners are concerned, and it's a welcome sight. Let's just call a spade for a division that in 2018 was just a mess. Up, down, sideways, you name it. No, there was no clarity in that division. It's very early, but there is an early leader in the clubhouse without question. That's Bricks and Mortar. Visually very impressive effort, and you just hope that he can stay sound. Magic Wand, the filly, she got in light. Wayne Lorden had her at 112 pounds. Frayden O'Brien thought she ran just fine. I think she would probably appreciate more distance out to 1.5 miles. At the end of the day, nothing wrong with running second in this kind of race. Delta Prince, a big effort from him as well, given the fact that, as I said prior, I believe he is better going shorter. I think he is a flat miler really at heart, but he ran quite well in this spot. And I think it's a kind of a combination of two things. I think he ran really well. He earned a 102 buyer on his own. But I can't help but think that he ran well, and maybe this third place finish was a result of some other horses just not running particularly well. We'll get to them here in a moment. Delta Prince, to me, he is best at 1 mile, maybe 1 1/16. I don't know that you want to go out to 1 1/8 with him, but they tried the 1 3/16 here, and they got a big piece of the pie. Catapult is a horse that I'd like to throw out there for your consideration for a horse watch or anything like that. I may use him as my horse watch on this week's Out of the Gate. You look at the way that this race was run, there was not a ton of closing really going on, with the exception of Bricks and Mortar, who came from, he got shuffled back going into the far turn, and he just came with a giant move like a truly special horse does. But Catapult is a horse that's got a little bit of, obviously he's got a mind of his own. He's a little bit eager. He can be keen from time to time. I don't think Joel Rosario could have done anything differently, but rounding the first turn, he is positioned, I thought, quite nicely about mid-pack. He's right there in the sort of same vicinity as Bricks and Mortar. And then as they turn onto the backside, you see Rosario's got just an absolute hammerlock on the horse, and he just wants to go. So he pushes up, he makes this big brush to the front, actually clears off to the lead going into the far turn. And given the fact that, again, horses, there were no true deep closers in this race, but most of the runs coming from Magic Wand and Delta Prince, they were more mid-pack positioned, and anyone else that was relatively close to the pace, I mean, take a look at it. Of the top 4 horses at the half-mile call, the only one that is around or even remotely close to the front is Catapult when it's all said and done. The 1, 2, and 4 runners at that time, Fahan Mura, Aerolith, and WW. I understand Fahan Mura and WW were both giant long shots, but they finished 8th, 9th, and 10th in a field of 10. So to me, this is a very impressive effort from Catapult. I'm not sold about the distance with him. I know he's won at 1 1/8. He won the Eddie Reed earlier this summer, or last summer, I should say. But at the same time, it was against a bit of a suspect field. I think he's best at a flat mile. He can go out to those distances and be effective, but I think he's at his best when he goes a little bit shorter. If John Sadler just keeps him going in this direction, he's 6 years old, and he's the kind of horse that it feels like it just took him a long time to put it together, because when Chad had him early on as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, he was just a crazed horse. He was out there just swapping leads, looking around. The talent was always there. He just never put it together mentally. He still clearly has his quirks, as I made mention, that big brush down the backside. But at the same time, to me, this is a kind of horse that can be very, very effective in a number of these big races going forward, whether it is a race at the Kilroe Mile out at Santa Anita, and eventually looking down the road at the Breeders' Cup Mile. I think Catapult ran better than it may even look here on paper. It was a good effort, but I think it was probably even a little bit better than maybe it first looks. Channel Maker, a little bit of an odd run from him. Looked like he was just kind of spinning his wheels. Early on, he came in a little bit tight, checked up on heels. He was farther back than I thought he would be. I expected him to be closer to the pace. Having said that, when they went as fast as they did, I can understand him being a little bit farther off of it. Not a great effort, not a terrible effort, but maybe this just kind of shows the difference as far as quality is concerned between he and maybe a true grade 1 caliber runner. Yoshida was certainly disappointing in this spot. Now, Yoshida was last in this race early on beneath Jose Ortiz. He was the 2-1 favorite, by the way, in this race. Bill Mott was quoted after the race saying, the bottom line is Yoshida wasn't making up much ground on them from the 8th pole to the wire, and I'm not going to give him a huge excuse, because it turns out maybe he's going to be better on dirt. Which makes me wonder, and I believe I saw that he is a nominee for it, but it would make me wonder, is the next time we see Yoshida on the dirt, maybe in Dubai, in a race like the the Dubai World Cup, excuse me. It just all of a sudden, I don't know that I totally want to just throw a blanket statement out there. I mean, look, Bill Mott knows a hell of a lot more than I do, but at the same time, given the condition of this turf course, mile and 3/16, trying to come from the back, which again, there weren't giant closing bids thrown into this race, with the exception of bricks and mortar. You needed to be sort of more mid-pack. The pace fell apart, but trying to come from 100 out of it, that just wasn't a real advantageous position to be in. I'm not totally sour on Yoshida. I still think the ability is there. Not his best effort by far, but certainly an effort that can be built upon. Next shares, he also, I thought, got a little bit unlucky going down into the first turn. He had to check pretty good turning onto the backside. And again, this is a horse that I look at from a distance standpoint and say, I don't think this is really what he wants. I think he is much better at a flat mile. Now, the problem is, if you believe that, like I do, and he's based in Southern California, and you have Catapult there, I think Catapult's probably a better horse than Next Shares is. The good news is you have options. You can ship around. We know he can handle Keeneland, which is no small feat because some horses love Keeneland, some horses hate it. So you at least have potential races down the road, whether it is the Makers 46 mile, the Shadwell mile in the fall. You got a number of options there. And again, he may not love Santa Anita, but he is one of the better horses in Southern California on grass, no question about it. And the bottom three, not a lot to add there. Aerolith, the filly from Japan, the pace probably didn't work to her advantage, nor is this footing or the distance. She was much better suited at a mile, and the other two horses, Faha and Mura, as well as WW, just long shots in here that didn't really figure at any point. But at the end of the day, you got a very, very impressive performance from Bricks and Mortar here. A horse that you just hope he can stay sound for Chad because the talent has always been there, and he really comes through. This is his breakout performance, if you will. Let's hope he can keep it together and string some races consecutively together. Sounds like the next one potentially on the target list for these connections would be the Turf Classic at Churchill Downs on the Derby undercard, a Grade 1 event. Bricks and Mortar wins the inaugural Pegasus World Cup Turf with a 106 Beyer speed figure. Now we're going to throw it into, again, the little sort of tweaked piece of this week's pod and potentially going forward. I'd like it to kind of trend this direction simply because the stakes montage, it's just been more sort of races that we didn't have time to get to, and at the end of the day, I still feel like some of those races do need to be acknowledged. I'm not going to go through every one of them and give you little tidbits about each of them, but there were pieces of some of those races that I think need to be discussed. So the way that we'll do this, we will run the stakes montage. It's a rather lengthy one this weekend. And then coming out of that, before we dive into the best performances from a Beyer standpoint or the DRF TV schedule, I'll give you some quick little hits, some quick bullet points. We'll go through with that, and then we'll roll it into the sort of regularly scheduled programming. But I think this is going to be the way that we'll move forward with the recap show. The biggest races will get the deep dives as far as the recaps are concerned. The slightly, I don't want to say lesser ones, but just strictly from a timing standpoint, I don't like this thing getting too long. So if we can keep it to the half-hour, 40-minute range as opposed to the hour 10, hour 20 range, that is the ultimate goal. So without further ado, let's throw it into the stakes montage, and we'll come back with some quick hits.
Between horses, Tricky Escape, Santa Monica on the outside, Semper Sentenci at the rail. Over the top in CKS Buena with Holy Helena and AA Azul Arch. Final eighth of a mile. CKS Buena out in the center of the race course with momentum for Landeros. Santa Monica is back to second. The La Pravayant goes to CKS Buena for her second stakes win of the meet. Set side as they wheel in. All Go still has the narrow lead, but Zulu Alpha gets the split he needed, and he's on to the front now. Soglio loose and charging, and these two moving away. It's Zulu Alpha in front. Soglio takes a run at him on the outside. Zulu Alpha on the inside. Soglio on the outside. Here's the finish. Zulu Alpha turned him away. So they're at the top of the stretch. Many chances here as Dream Pauline gets through on the inside and kicks on with it. Pacific Gale on the outside. Stormy Embrace from between horses. Final eighth of a mile, and it's Javier Castellano and Dream Pauline who ride the rail to win the Hurricane Birdie, going away. Pacific Gale was second. Stormy Embrace was third. Side is now second. Storm Advisory is now third after 3/4 in 109.4. There's an eighth of a mile to go, and Aztec Sense, the Wind Machine, is in front by a length and a half. To the attack, Fellowship one more time, breaking Lucky on the outside, but through it all, Aztec Sense with unmeasurable resolve, he wins the Fred Hooper. Very close for and Dina Del Sur let go with Dulce Lily on the outside. Widest of all in Conquest, Hard Candy, Dulce Lily putting her best foot forward now down the center. Lover's Key with Fire Key. Final eighth of a mile, Dulce Lily the leader. Conquest, Hard Candy, Fire Key on the outside. They come for the wire. It's Dulce Lily to win it. Conquest, Hard Candy was second. Fire Key.
Amy's Challenge and Alex Conchari to the final furlong. A 4-length lead over Swing and Sway, Jessica Krupnik, and Cathedral Reader. Vertical Oak, not today. Amy's Challenge to the 16th pole, and she has run them right off their feet. Cathedral Reader is second. Amy's Challenge straight and strong. Amy's Challenge won by 6.
King Abner is still there. Ashley Loves Sugar now puts in a huge run on the outside. Accountability's had a good trip, and here's Rye coming through with a big, powerful run and a Hall of Fame ride from Kent DeSormo as Rye streaks home. Rye will win the Unusual Heat Turf Classic presented by City National Bank. A tremendous. They passed the quarter pole and turned for home. SY Sky, a length to Queen B to You, who's chasing gamely. Cordiality on the far outside is in third. Fiery Lady is finishing strongly in the center of the course. SY Sky, very game on the front end. She refuses to yield. Queen B to You took a shot at her, but the classy SY Sky wins the Sunshine Millions Filly and Mare Turf Sprint. Queen B to You. He has work to do to catch Richards Boy, though, who turns for home loaded with a 2.5-length lead. Touching Rainbows is trying very hard to close the gap. Then it's Edwards going left on the outside of Heck Yeah. 16th pole, Richards Boy confronted now by Touching Rainbows. Touching Rainbows on the outside gets him, and it's Touching Rainbows to win the Don Valpredo Cal Cup Sprint. They're at the top of the stretch. On the inside, Our Silver Oak is challenging Teacher's Treasure. These two head in head with Takeo Squared and Listing. Listing and Takeo Squared going on with it. Our Silver Oak had to steady along the inside. It's Listing or Takeo Squared, nose and nose. Listing, Takeo Squared battling to the wire. Listing wins the Cal Cup Turf Sprint Stakes.
Well clear of the others, and they're at the top of the stretch. World of Trouble set down for the drive by Irad Ortiz Jr. and moving away. Recruiting Ready is back to second, then Sing and Cry in Dubai with Bel Tapasseri. But this is a world-class effort from a world-class sprinter. It's all World of Trouble. Geared down and 3 on top. Recruiting Ready was second. Bel Tapasseri.
Midnight Bisou, but Heaven Has My Nikki has kicked, and Heaven Has My Nikki is still with a neck in front. Moonlit Garden with an eighth to go. Midnight Bisou's now bearing down on the outside. Heaven Has My Nikki, Moonlit Garden, but here comes Midnight Bisou with a late push, and Midnight Bisou shines brightly in the Houston Laker picture down the center of the race course. Mark it off, not done yet, but Bigger Picture's taking the lead. Some in time is tenacious. Zapparini has run with an eighth to go. Bigger Picture now 3 clear. It's all Bigger Picture. The 2-time champ is now going to be a 3-time champ. Bigger Picture crushes in the Connolly. Zapparini for second.
Past the quarter pole, Conquest Tsunami still in charge, maintains a length and a half lead. On the inside, Sistron is running a very good race. Outside of him, it's Eddie Haskell, but it's all Conquest Tsunami. A powerhouse performance in the Clockers Corner Stakes. From Flag Fall to That's All. Conquest Tsunami cruises in by 4. Sistron was second. Eddie Haskell.
All right, so there was the stakes montage. Now, this is in no particular order. It's in a rough order. Some of the races are a little bit out of sequence, but just a couple of quick thoughts that you may want to throw in some sort of a notebook that you have, whether it's in DRF Horse Watch, or if you have your own piece that you just put things together, little notes, maybe some things that you want to keep in the back of your mind. Thought it was a dream trip for Zulu Alpha winning that WL McKnight. In the grand scheme of things, you usually don't want to be playing horses off of perfect trips in their next race. He did dig in. He turned Solio away. I thought it was a good effort, but again, an absolute dream trip. Maybe something that you want to keep in mind when you go forward wherever his next start is. Coppertown, rearing up in the gate prior to the Hooper. There's some speculation that he may have hit his head on the gate. And look, at the end of the day, when you see the way that he ran, he was up there wide, fast, forward, ended up paying the price late. You combine that with potentially hitting his head on the gate before the race started, you may want to give him the benefit of the doubt for his next start. I'm not going to hold this race against him. And again, you can't really hold the Cigar Mile against him. So now you're building a case for a very dirtied up horse if you do believe that this is actually what happened. But he did rear up quite badly before the race started. Aztec Sense, in that same race, he was vanned off afterward against speculation on social media, is that the X-Rays have come back clean. A very odd run from Breaking Lucky in the Hooper. Now, this is sort of the flip side of that whole piece. He looked like he was in deep water on the far turn. He wheeled out into the clear, and he rallied on again. Usually speaking, when I see a run like that, it makes me question the quality of the field, because in theory, if there are good horses running and finishing at the end, a horse like Breaking Lucky, you're not going to be able to go zigzagging through, and then when it looks like you're just done, wheel out and come back with another run. Makes me a little bit skeptical about the quality of that field. We won't know until they do start coming back out of that race and what they ultimately do, but that may be something that you want to keep an eye on. I've thrown in my formulator notes in for that trip note. At the top, you can put a race note, and for now, I have question the quality of the field with the date. I'll wait and see and update that accordingly when the horses start coming back and either validate that thought or they sort of debunk it and prove that it was actually a solid race. The La Prevoyant, I thought Semper Santete made the first move into the far turn. The fact that she was able to stay on as gamely as she did, I thought that was a good effort from her. Maybe she's one that you want to give a little bit of an upgrade for that race as opposed to some of the other horses. As far as the run in the, what race was this? The Hurricane Birdie. Apologies. Dream Paulina, a great trip in the grand scheme of things. She's in behind horses. She's able to shoot down on the inside. The difficult thing for me to sit here and say, well, she had a perfect trip, maybe you want to downgrade her. When you go off and win by open lengths, it's kind of difficult for me to sit here and really dispute the fact that you were just the best horse there. So that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I'm leaning toward it just being a good trip, and it is what it is, but she was the best horse, as opposed to potentially a situation like Zulu Alpha, where he had a dream trip and he only prevailed by, what, a neck or a half length. Amy's Challenge down at Oaklawn Park, she absolutely whistled in the American Beauty. On her best day when she's allowed to get out there and dictate things, she's very, very good. My concern, the American Beauty, 6 furlongs. Unfortunately for her fillies and mare sprinters, 7/8 of a mile, that's really their distance, and I don't know that I love her at that additional furlong. So if all these races were at 6, I think she's interesting, but boy, you get up to 7/8. I start to question ultimately, is that how far she wants to go? In the Unusual Heat Turf out at Santa Anita, a brilliant ride from Kent DeSormo on ride down on the inside. Looks like he's going to try to angle out riding the far turn. Quickly alters course down to the wood, shoots up, gets it done. Finishes first ahead of Ashley Love Sugar. I thought a good effort from that horse as well. The old boy, he still got a little bit of run in him, given the fact that this was a different running style. He came from more mid-pack. He was wide rounding the far turn, and he boxed on. I thought it was a good effort from him in the grand scheme. He can still run. I think he's interesting, obviously. But I do believe this is more of the level that he fits in now, the Cal-bred, state-bred kind of ranks. Richard's Boy, as far as the Cal Cup Sprint on dirt was concerned, he just couldn't see out the distance. I thought it was a good ride. I thought everything went the way it was supposed to until he got a little bit tired at the end of it, got run down by Touching Rainbows. Touching Rainbows is a horse that I think this is his level. I think he's a Cal-bred, that he can make money in these state-bred races. You have to wonder a little bit about Edwards Going Left, who ultimately was the favorite there in that spot. He's had a number of these races where he's just very, very sluggish out of the gate, but this race in particular, he's basically under an all-out send early on. Takes him a while to get his footing, get his bearings. Comes with a little bit of a bid, but at the end of the day, never a threat for the top 2. Usually, it's a sign of form trending the wrong direction, and you have to wonder. He's had injuries. He's an old boy at this point. maybe he's starting to lose a little bit of interest in this thing. He can still run, but I don't know that he's ever going to get back to what he once was. And you do have to wonder if this continues to be a trend, then perhaps we're seeing sort of the end of the road for Edwards going left. And as far as Midnight Bisou is concerned down at Sam Houston on Sunday afternoon, she probably had to work a little bit more than most people thought she would. In the grand scheme of things, I didn't think it was a bad effort. There was slow pace. She came wide. She made that big move. I still would love to see her at 7/8 of a mile, but it sounds like the plan right now is to go down to the Apple Blossom at 9. I think to me, it's going to be very interesting to see how that filly and mare division plays out, the older fillies and mares, because she is like a perfect candidate, in my opinion, to look at and say, if ultimately she's just not as good as Monomoy Girl at 9 furlongs, if she's not as good, if Elate comes back, she's not as good as Elate at 9 or 10 furlongs or anything like that, and that filly and mare sprint division is just up for the grabs, man, I would have a very, very difficult time not at least entertaining the idea of turning her back. I get that the bigger money is in those route races, but I would just love to see her back at 7/8 of a mile, because I think she would very clearly be the best horse in that division. I do wonder, you continue down this road, you try these two-turn races, if you get to a certain point and you can't get over the hump with those other couple girls in there, but most notably Monomoy Girl, I wonder if at that point then the connections start to consider the idea of turning her back and getting her ready for a campaign for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, because just that Filly and Mare older division on dirt, it may not be the deepest, but there is legitimate quality at the top of it. And now you do wonder, and she's part of that, don't get me wrong, but I'd love to see her on a little bit of a turn back here at 7/8 at some point this year. So there you have it. Some quick hits, some quick notes there from those races in the stakes montage. This is probably going to be the format going forward, unless you folks don't really like it. Let me know again on Twitter at Bernier_Matt or beneath the video player on YouTube. Let's throw it into the weekend's best as far as Beyer speed figure performances are concerned. We'll take them right in order. The 3-year-old males, this is a name that you have all heard of already, unless you've been living under a rock and you weren't paying attention this weekend. Hidden Scroll in his career debut for Bill Mott. He went out there at Gulfstream on Saturday and earned a 104 Beyer speed figure. It was a sloppy sealed track. That is usually a very, very difficult thing to gauge. Was it the track that he just really appreciated as opposed to the rest of his peers, or are we talking about a potential superstar? I'm going to lean more toward the superstar just because of the number. The number is so gaudy. If it was an 89 or a 90, I would say, well, it's still very, very good, don't get me wrong, but it's way too early to make a definitive call one way or the other. Wait and see what happens when some of those horses come back in their next race. They will still be in maiden races, and wait and see what happens when Hidden Scroll comes back, wherever he comes back. But a 104 Beyer for him for 3-year-old males. 3-year-old fillies on dirt, Ujayi, 80 in the Ruthless at Aqueduct. 3-year-old males on turf, Listing, 82. You saw him going down the hill in the Cal Cup Turf Sprint out at Santa Anita. 3-year-old fillies on turf, not a big weekend. Got a race down at Turf Paradise, a 60 Beyer for Free My Soul. Older males on dirt, we talked about him at the top. The big boy, City of Light, goes out a winner in the Pegasus World Cup with a 112 Beyer. Older fillies and mares on dirt, Dream Pauline, again, a beautiful trip, perfect trip, shooting up the inside in the Hurricane Birdie. But at the end of the day, when you win by more than 3 lengths, it's difficult for me to say that the trip is why you ultimately prevailed. Older males on grass, Bricks and Mortar, visually very, very impressive, winning the Pegasus World Cup Turf for the 106. By the way, Dream Pauline, a 97 Beyer. And the older fillies and mares on grass, you have Magic Wand with a 102 in the Pegasus World Cup Turf down at Gulfstream. There you have it, the weekend's best as far as Beyer speed figure performances are concerned here on the Matt Bernier Show. Let's take a quick look and see what's on deck this week for DRF TV, the schedule of events. The preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show will be back at the end of the week. I'm sure we'll be talking about Gulfstream Park because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is Holy Bull weekend. So obviously some Derby preps. I believe Maximus Mischief is supposed to be involved, perhaps Mios. Some other nice runners as well. On top of that, you'll have DRF Bets Races of the Day. You will have the Watchmaker Watch. You will have the Weekend Warrior. You'll have Out of the Gate. You'll have a little bit of everything. Pedigree Report, all this good stuff. Video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. Those of you listening live, thanks for doing so. Those of you that listen in podcasts, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. Make sure the bell icon is lit up and there's not a line through it. You'll get everything that we've got over on DRF TV. If you are on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, write us a review, give us a positive rating. Always greatly appreciated, for better or for worse. We would prefer that better, but at the end of the day, we listen. If you want something a little bit different, you don't like the way that this little format was laid out, let me know. I'll take it into consideration. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter. My handle is @Bernier_Matt. Until I come back with the preview edition at the end of the week, best of luck. However you play, whatever you play, whatever you play this week. This has been the preview, or the recap. Well, which one is this? This is the recap. It's been the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show.